Hello, everyone. If you've been joining us for our C.A.L.M conference sessions, welcome back. If this is the first one you've been able to join, welcome, and be sure to get the replays. All throughout November, the USC Family Caregiver Support Center is celebrating you and National Family Caregiver Month with its C.A.L.M Caregivers Are Learning More conference. I'm Paulina Milana, here to guide you through all of our incredible sessions that speak to this year's theme of the art of balance. This is the 24th year that the Los Angeles Caregiver Resource Center is presenting its special suite of events, meeting family caregivers wherever you may be in your caregiver journey and helping you navigate your path with tools, education, support services, and so much more. I encourage you to explore what we have to offer by visiting our website at losangelescrc.usc.edu. Now, today's session is all about balancing the biz of caregiving, the checklists, the checkbooks, the legal, the financial, all of it. And today we are lucky to have financial expert Stephen Rashal with us, as well as legal experts Thomas Christopher and Yolande Erickson. They're joining us today to give us insights into what we need, why we want it, and how to go about getting it. As we've been doing all month, we'll also be bringing on our family caregiver authors. And today we have three: Kay Annenson, Makiba Pease, and Jean Erickson. Now, we'll meet everyone shortly, and you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions and get answers at the end of the session. So please be sure to jot them down, or just go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll grab them and we'll ask them for you. Now, remember that family caregivers, the ones who are on these sessions, each one authored a chapter in a book called The Caregiver Chronicles. And the LACRC is making it possible for you to possibly get a book for free. We're hosting a random drawing. All you need to do is post on your social media something about any one of the sessions during this year's C.A.L.M. You can invite people to continue to join, because even if they've missed some, they'll get the replays. They just have to register. Make sure that you tag us and then send a screenshot to this email that's on the screen, lacrc-com@usc.edu. We'll put everybody into a hat, so to speak, and pull out folks who will get a free book from our random drawing. Now, to start us out tonight, as always, we ask a question for our audience to answer in the chat. So go ahead and type "me" into the chat if dealing with the expenses and the paperwork and the business musts that come with being a family caregiver have you waving that white flag. How many of us have been there and know what that feels like? The good news, you are not alone and you have come to the right place. Now, that said, here comes the disclaimer. This session is not official legal, official financial advice that's specific to you and your circumstances, right? There is no one answer, there is no magic bullet. So this session is really designed as an introduction to get you started in thinking about or furthering needs related to the business of caregiving. Now, let's bring on our family caregiver authors. They are going to introduce themselves and they're going to tell us a little bit about what they wrote about their experiences as a family caregiver, their financial and legal kind of issues perhaps that they've had. And then once we hear from their stories, then we will move on to our legal and financial experts. So Kay, Makiba, Jean, you guys want to round robin?
Okay.
You want to start with Kay?
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. Kay Annenson here. I wrote the chapter after the accident. I live in California, originally from Canada, and I've spent years as an administrator, mostly in the not-for-profit sector. and doing research and development and bookkeeping. And then my son moved out here and I followed him. I took early retirement and came out here and loved it. And he had a great success as an audio engineer here and was doing well and was saving money to buy a house in Tennessee when he was coming home one night from a late night show Netflix was doing on the Bridgerton show. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I don't know. Anyway, a car tapped him. He tried to get away and ran out of road, went over the freeway. And that night I got a call from the freeway. He had asked a woman who had stopped to call me on his phone and tell me what happened. And I followed him because I had location sharing on Google, and I followed him. I thought to see where he was going, and it was to a trauma center. And he lost his leg and most of his eyesight and most of the use of one hand from nerve damage. So this happened, between 20 after 10 p.m. one night to 21 after 10. So that's how fast. Before that, we had completely separate lives. I had my place, he had his place. He was busy, I was busy. We saw each other. And now we live together in a one-bedroom apartment. He has the living room, and I have the bedroom. And neither one of us has worked since that accident because he is still recovering. And we didn't know that this would happen. We didn't know 2.5 years later we'd still be at this. We both thought we'd both be back to work. So we didn't plan anything ever. So we started out, I was at his bedside all night long and went, oh my gosh, I have to figure out who to call to say he won't be going to work. He was doing a live show that night. So I went home and I had to find so much information from him to contact people. And then his wallet didn't show up. So I was trying to cancel all his credit cards, and the bank wouldn't let me do anything because I didn't have any power to do anything on his banking. I didn't know any passwords. I was hacking into his laptop and hacking into accounts. It was unbelievable while falling apart, emotionally. So then as time ensued, money became an issue. Like he's fine mentally and everything, although he was very drugged, and then he was in an induced coma. And he would say, but don't I have all this money? Or, wasn't there a GoFundMe account? And it was like I felt like I was being accused, but not really directly accused, but there was some sort of discomfort about talking about money between us. And what I learned from this experience is that I had to include him more, way more than I was. I was just on automatic mode of running the show, which I've done. I'm an administrator. So I just kept going, taking charge, talking to doctors, talking to nurses, and he was feeling like he was losing his life, and control the reins of his life. And it was very much a power struggle between us because as I would give him his life back, I was like, oh, but you're going to screw it up because, I'm just so much better at this than you are. But I had to let him do it, and we're still at it today. Now he's taking over all his medical stuff and making the phone calls, and I just say, I'm here for you, and I'm just here for you. I'm just here, and he makes mistakes and he solves them, and I'm so proud of him. So that's what we continue to struggle with today. I mean, we never joined our finances together. I have my checking accounts. He has his. We have Zelled money back and forth to each other. I keep very detailed financial accounting of everything, and I have receipts and binders. And in case anybody wants an accounting of how I spent, like the GoFundMe money that people raised for him, and a couple of other things. And then he got retroactive money that he keeps. That's his business. But we do know that we're kind of joined together now going forward into the future. And I really feel like there should be some kind of understanding of what of the implications of that. Like I'm getting older. I had breast cancer this year, so glad I'm still here. What if I wasn't? What would have happened to him? If something happened to him, what would happen to me? And none of this is done. We don't have a single piece of paper. I don't know any of his stuff. He doesn't know any of mine, and we haven't made the decision to go and talk to a bank or a lawyer or something. We don't even know who we would go talk to say we want to feel independent financially and have control of our own money, but our lives are joined. So how do we do that? So that's it from me. Did I do everything? Yes,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah, you did everything and then some. And really, Kay, the lines that really stick out for me are you didn't plan anything ever, right? And that there's a discomfort talking about money. You definitely are not alone. I promise you that, and I know the people listening are nodding their heads, I'm sure. And with that, let's go to Makiba.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Makiba Pease. I am author of Chapter 9 entitled Living Life Waiting for Someone to Die. I titled it that way because I realized 7 years in, I was in fact living my life waiting for my mom to pass away. Not really realizing that her life had become totally encompassing my own and it had overtaken my own life. 7 years in, I decided to sell my mother's primary residence and move to the suburbs because I had a teenage son, not wanting him to have the social experience of South Central Los Angeles, battling Mexican gangs, black gangs, and the police force that was not equipped to and more afraid of them being outgunned by the youngsters that were running around that city. Um, having made that choice, I was sued by three of my siblings, taken to probate court prior to my mother passing. My mother is still living. I'm now 10 years in. But that experience has made me a fierce advocate for planning, estate planning. Um, Most people don't understand what it takes to have the legal documentation and the legal paperwork in place to actually be a caregiver. When you talk about having medical and durable power of attorneys and conservatorship, most people simply don't understand what it entails, let alone how to get it. So, this session is near and dear and very personal to my heart. I'm happy to have these experts along to sit beside us to talk about our journey. It was a 3-year battle. I was gratefully represented by an amazing attorney, Carlton Weeks and Associates. I'm going to plug them because they did an amazing job getting me through the process. I was successful through the process, a very expensive process. Probate court is not cheap. Um, but I successfully gained um, allowed for the medical power of attorney to stand as it was and to gain conservatorship of my mother's estate, so that I don't have to go through petty court um, filings from anyone from this point forward. But had I known that walking in the door, becoming a caregiver for my mom, I certainly would have invested the time while she was still coherent to get some of these things done earlier. And that's just a tad bit of my story.
Ad bit, yeah. Makiba has gone through a lot and done so with grace, and honestly, she probably has earned an honorary an honorary legal degree in all of this for sure. But and then we've got Jean.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my story's a little different. It's recent. My mom just passed away on October 6th, and her documents were very much in order. They were written in 2010, but my dear sweet mom bequeathed too much money. So she outlived her money, and I'm just at the beginning of the trust administration process with the lawyer, looking at the reality of selling the house versus my preference borrowing against it. So I'm in that process. My mom did some good pre planning. She did her burial. We had the checking and savings as joint. She set all that up. But the thing that my mom did that is now problematic today is she lived to be 96. And I was in the office with the lawyer when we were planning her trust. And pointed out, I said, Mom, you don't have that much money to give. Nonetheless, she went ahead and bequeathed well beyond what she had in the bank that day, or would make an interest for that matter. So that is being sorted out. The lawyer is, as I say, at the beginning of the process. My mom was very organized, and most all the money disappeared over the 16 years that I was with her, living with her, paying the bills. All that money I watched over those 16 years dwindle to her monthly Social Security and General Electric pension. So now we are in the process of um, devising or administering the bequeaths. And my goal is to stay in the home, to borrow against the equity in the home so I can stay in the home. This was my grandma's home. So that is my soon to be adventure. And I hope to stay here. I'm third generation in the home. My grandma bought it in the 50s, and my mom inherited it in the 1980s. And I'm really hopeful I can stay here.
Yeah, Jean, and so sorry about your mom recently passing. But God love her that she actually tried to put that stuff together, right? And your attitude about this adventure, we definitely are going to be hearing from the experts regarding everything from, if you don't have anything, how do you pre-plan, along with making sure that you revisit your documents every few years, right? For the very reason that you're kind of bringing up here. Um, so now we're going to get to the experts. Before we do, please, if you're listening and you're kind of like, oh, wow, that sounds like me. Oh, gosh, I've got my own story about that. Type tools into the chat. If what you're hearing is really kind of resonating, and if you could use now some tools on the legal and the financial aspects, because that's what we're going to be giving you. And we're going to start on the financial end of things. So to kick us off is Stephen Rochelle. He's going to introduce himself and talk to you a bit about financial planning. So, Stephen?
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Kay Makiva, Jean, thank you for sharing your stories with us. I really appreciate the LACRC including me today on this program, and I'm excited to share some knowledge and practical tips about financial planning for family caregivers. My name is Stephen Rochelle. I'm a certified financial planner, and as a financial professional and someone who has witnessed the challenges that caregivers face firsthand, I really am honored to guide you through this part of our discussion today. Today, we're going to cover three key areas of financial planning that are particularly relevant for caregivers. This includes life insurance and long-term care insurance, expense tracking and accountability, and retirement planning. We can move on to the next slide, please. These topics are designed to hopefully provide you with practical strategies that are going to help you secure your financial future while continuing to provide care and support for your loved ones in need. So let's get started. We can move on to the next slide. We're going to begin with life insurance and long-term care insurance. These are two tools that can provide financial peace of mind and protect your family financially. For caregivers, life insurance is more than just a safety net, right? If something happens to you, life insurance can provide funds, completely tax-free, by the way, to cover caregiving expenses, provide for your dependents, and whether that's aging parents, children with special needs, or really anyone that you designate as your beneficiary. So let's talk about the two main types of life insurance. You've got term versus permanent life insurance. You might be wondering what's the difference between term life insurance and other types of permanent life insurance, such as whole life, universal life, variable life, lots of names for permanent life insurance. Well, term insurance, as the name suggests, provides coverage for a specific period of time, usually 10, 20, or 30-year terms. Those are the most common. Term insurance is the most affordable type of life insurance by far. And this is because the insurance company only needs to provide coverage to you during that specified time, right? So after that term is over, these policies will lapse, meaning they will go away. They no longer provide benefits. So think of term insurance like renting insurance. You're going to have the benefit so long as you continue to pay that premium and so long as the term hasn't expired yet. Next is that permanent insurance, which I mentioned comes in a lot of different flavors. So whole life, universal life, variable universal life, those are the three most common. But there's others that are permanent insurance. These types of insurance policies will inevitably be more expensive to maintain. And that's because the insurance company is taking more risk by extending coverage to you indefinitely, so long as you continue to pay that premium. There are also additional costs for this type of insurance because these types of permanent policies usually provide other types of features. Maybe they have some sort of cash savings component. Do be careful though, because there are unfortunately unscrupulous insurance salespeople that might tout these savings and investing components of these policies. Keep in mind, these are insurance policies, so you really ought to be using them for insurance. And truthfully, there are much, much better and lower cost options for you to save and invest money outside of using life insurance. So that's not to say that permanent insurance is bad. It's just they're very different. And something you're going to need to consider with whichever type of policy you choose is calculating how much coverage. They call that the death benefit. So how much coverage that you want to target. Some of the things that you want to think about when figuring out what that benefit amount should be are things like, what are your current caregiving costs? What about income replacement for yourself, right? How much income are you earning right now that's covering those expenses for yourself and your dependents and your loved ones, and maybe those that you're providing care for? You also might want to think of future needs, things like paying off a mortgage or funding the long-term care needs of a loved one. Ultimately, you may be limited based on how much premium you can actually afford, right? So your budget might limit how much of a policy you can afford to purchase, because the higher that benefit, the more expensive the premium. Those go hand in hand. Now let's talk a little bit about long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance is just as crucial. Fun fact, long-term care insurance, the benefits as a percentage, right? The long-term care insurance policies are actually used more than life insurance policies. The reason for that is people typically pay their long-term care insurance up until the point where they need to use them. And all too often, folks that have life insurance, they either stop paying their premiums, they let those policies lapse, or in the case of a term policy, like we mentioned, the term lapses. So long-term care insurance is super crucial. It can provide for covering the cost of long-term care needs. It helps to pay for expenses such as in-home care, assisted living, nursing home expenses. These are costs that many of you probably know firsthand can deplete savings pretty quickly. When should you be thinking about, or when should you be buying long-term care? Well, the best time to consider purchasing long-term care insurance is before you have any sort of health issues that arise. Premiums are typically lower when you are younger and healthier. That's also true for life insurance. So the older we get, the more expensive long-term care and life insurance premiums are going to be. And unfortunately, if we're already past a certain age, or we have certain health history or take certain medications, we might already be precluded from even getting life insurance or long-term care insurance extended to us. So the sooner that you look into that coverage, probably the better. if it's something that you are considering. Something else to note these days, something that's a lot more common than buying a standalone long-term care policy is purchasing a hybrid policy. So these are life insurance policies, these are permanent life insurance policies that include some kind of a living benefit. A living benefit meaning you can use part of that benefit while you're still alive. You don't have to wait until you pass away for your beneficiaries to receive that death benefit, but you can use these sort of long-term care benefits to reimburse you for certain long-term care costs or provide money for long-term care needs. So combining these coverages of long-term care and life insurance into a single policy, while it's not exactly the same as a standalone long-term care policy, combining this coverage is really advantageous to a lot of folks, or they view it as very advantageous because it's a lot more flexible and it can provide both of those benefits, right? A death benefit if you're no longer here, a long-term care insurance if you are still here and you need to use a pool of some of that money. So those are called hybrid life insurance policies or hybrid, life LTC policies. That's a way to combine those two types of insurance. Let's move on to our next topic. Here we're going to talk a bit more about just expense tracking and accountability. Kay mentioned something during, she was sharing her story with us. She mentioned something that kind of struck a chord with me, that even though it turns out she was doing a great job tracking all of those details and keeping all of those receipts, those financial conversations can still be taboo. And even though no one was accusing her, she still maybe, or we still maybe feel that sort of sense of financial mistrust. And a lot of that might be up here, but what I can tell you is if you do a good job of tracking expenses and being more accountable and transparent, this can really help you take better control of those caregiving related costs. Right? Tracking caregiving expenses can take many different forms, and it actually means different things to different people. Some situations, you might be the person that's providing care or that you're providing care to. They might have a trust, or maybe they've received an insurance settlement, or maybe they received supplemental income from Social Security, disability, other programs, or maybe you're actually covering the full cost of care out of your own pocket, right? So there's a lot of different situations that I know each of you are facing. It's unique, it's different. But either way, no matter what the case, budgeting matters, right? Caregiving often brings unexpected expenses into our lives, like medical bills, home modifications, respite care. So creating a caregiving budget is probably the first step in staying organized and minimizing stress. And I get it, right off the bat, you might not have an idea of what these budgeted items might be because you've yet to experience them. So what you want to do in those situations, and really all situations, you just want to begin tracking and creating awareness about what these expenses are. And the more you begin tracking, whether that just be paper and pen or saving on to actual paper receipts, or maybe you're using some kind of an app. There's some great budgeting apps out there. I know one I've heard many clients talk about and use is called YNAB, YNAB. That stands for You Need a Budget. That's the acronym, YNAB. Frankly, a spreadsheet can do wonders. So whether it's an Excel or a Google spreadsheet, this will help you actually track those different spending transactions, but more importantly, group them into categories to get a better idea over 3, 6, months, and eventually a year or two, to see what these spending trends are specifically on the cost of care. And using those tools can really provide clarity on where your money is going to make it easier to spot savings opportunities for one, but it's also really, really important for that transparency we were talking about, right? And maybe you're in a position where you need to submit for reimbursements, and we also don't want to forget about taking full advantage of tax deductions. So maybe you didn't know that, but you may actually qualify for certain tax deductions if you're serving as the primary caregiver for someone or for a dependent. Be sure to discuss this with your accountant or your tax preparer, but there's probably a good chance that you can deduct certain medical expenses. You can use dependent care credits, or even claim a parent or a loved one as a dependent on your own tax return if they're not filing a separate tax return. So keeping those detailed records of your caregiving related expenses, it really is critical for claiming these benefits, and more importantly, for the transparency of when and if a family member asks, or maybe even just to have a frank conversation with the person you're providing care to, or if there's other trustees or family members involved with dispersing funds, being able to document and share with them in an open and honest way and communicate with them how this money is being spent, that can really make for a much smoother process in managing the finances and the budgeting for the folks that you're providing caregiving services to. Another thing to keep in mind, maybe you share caregiving duties, or I mentioned, you might have caregiving duties, other people provide the financial oversight, right? So it could be really helpful to set up systems for transparency. We mentioned that spreadsheet, so maybe it's a spreadsheet that you share with these other stakeholders, right? You could do that through Google Sheets or other ways that you can share documents amongst multiple people. Maybe it makes sense to use some kind of an app and you have multiple logins to access that same app. Or one of the easiest ways might even just be using dedicated financial accounts for care-related expenses. Some of you probably have set up a separate checking account. Maybe it's a joint account or some other kind of a money holding account, a checking account that you're specifically using to pay those care-related expenses out of. Certainly a good idea if you're not already doing that. Just another way to keep things a bit more organized, and you don't have to think twice about where you're getting the funds from, and you're not accidentally using your personal card and having to then transfer that information over to another system to get reimbursed for something. If it's all coming directly from that account you set up for those caregiving expenses, that might make your life a whole lot easier moving forward and balancing this budget. Now, we also know that all too often caregiving can take precedence over our own personal needs, but it is essential to not neglect our own financial and retirement planning. So being able to balance caregiving and personal retirement, it's not an easy task, but you really want to avoid neglecting your own retirement savings. So even when caregiving costs are high, really you should do your best to try to continue contributing to your 401k or your IRA. I mean, your financial future is equally as important as the people you're providing care to. Now, maybe in your situation, you've left the workforce or you have reduced hours. Maybe you no longer have access to a workplace retirement plan like a 401k or a 403b. Well, maybe in that situation, you might be in a position where your spouse can potentially make contributions on your behalf. There's contributions are called spousal IRA or spousal contributions to a retirement plan, and that's when your spouse is making contributions on your behalf or contributions based on their income, but on your behalf to some kind of a retirement account or retirement plan. For those that are age 50 and older, you might be able to take advantage of what are called catch-up contributions. So you may be aware that there are limits, maximum limits on how much you can contribute to certain retirement accounts, such as an IRA or 401k. Well, one of the benefits of being over age 50, you actually get what's called a catch-up contribution. So you have an additional amount that you can contribute in addition to that maximum limit that the IRS sets every single year. But maybe you're not earning as much income, like we mentioned, or maybe not earning an income at all, so tax deductions might not be as important to you. And if that's the case, you might want to consider Roth contributions instead what are called traditional or pre-tax contributions when you're saving for retirement. So this includes saving and investing using accounts like Roth IRAs or Roth 401ks. The major benefit here being that the money that you save in Roth types of accounts grows tax deferred and can be distributed tax free, so no taxes after age 59 and a half. It's not a surprise, you're facing these caregiving costs today. It's likely that you might have some similar or other circumstances that require your own caregiving in the future. So being able to save and invest and grow your money for retirement makes it that you could actually save this money to be used for your future caregiving needs. Down the road, as you get closer to retiring or needing to take distributions from these retirement savings accounts, you're going to want to consider different withdrawal strategies. The reason I'm bringing that up is certain types of accounts have different rules and tax ramifications for distributions. So a moment ago, I was talking about Roth IRA and Roth 401k. Those are the types of contributions that you do not get a tax deduction for putting the contributions in, but you get the tax benefit of no taxes on distributions when the money comes out, and that includes the growth too, no taxes at all. Well, on the other end of the spectrum, we have pre-tax or traditional retirement contributions to a 401k or a IRA or a 403b. Every single penny of a traditional contribution is taxed when it comes out of that account. So, right, we've got money that's not taxed at all. We've got money that every single penny is taxed as ordinary income. And then you might have some other money that you're saving that's not necessarily in a retirement account. It's just in a trust account or an individual or a joint investment account. That money is going to be subject to capital gains. I know this might sound a little bit like a whirlwind. There's a lot of tax complexity here, but just know that you can be in a really good position. It's advantageous to you if you can have those different buckets of savings to pull from when you're retired and when you need to pull money for your own care. So we call that a withdrawal strategies. That mostly wraps up my part of the presentation today. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss your personal situation further, I encourage you to reach out to me or another trusted financial professional.
Stephen, wow. And we're going to bring everybody on, especially the family caregiver authors, to ask questions. We have some questions that made it into the comments that we're going to ask you. Before we get to those, I just want to ask you, first off, thank you so much. You know so much, and you know, this is your second language, right? Or your first language, we should even call it. But to those of us kind of listening, I kind of almost glaze over with all of this information. I get like a little overwhelmed. I don't think I'm alone, but one of the things that you said is that it is scary, right? Or maybe I just put this, I'm hearing it's scary to get a picture of your finances. But the truth is, and I found this out firsthand, actually getting clear on your financial situation, right? And that budget. I love that that acronym YNAB. You need a budget. I wholeheartedly agree with that. If you were to say, hey, everyone listening on this call, here's the first thing I would recommend that you do. No matter where you're at, is there like one thing that you're like, you can easily do this? This is what I would recommend.
Yeah, that's a great question, Paulina. The number one thing I recommend for everyone, and this is even outside of caregiving, the most impactful thing to remember when it comes to just growing financially, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you save and spend that makes all the difference, right? So, right, it's not how much you make, it's how you save and spend that makes all that difference. So, taking that to that next step I mentioned previously, especially for folks that are newer to this, the number one thing that everyone is very capable of doing, and you need to choose the way that you're most comfortable doing it, is increasing your awareness by tracking your expenses. In the realm of caregiving, we're kind of narrowing that down, obviously, to just the caregiving related expenses. Obviously, you can apply this personally and look at all of your expenses, but that's really the first step. Gaining awareness about how you're spending your money, seeing it, being honest with that information. I'm telling you right now, you become more aware of those financial behaviors, you will inevitably make changes and adjustments to how you spend your money, even without anybody stepping in and telling you to do otherwise. It's that own self-awareness that you're now seeing, oh, geez, I didn't realize, I knew I spent a lot of money on food, but I didn't know I spent that much money on food. Probably the next time you're thinking about going out to eat, you might think twice, like, you know what, maybe I should just make some food at home today. It's healthier anyways, right? So over time, as you increase your awareness about how you're spending and what you're spending that money on, you'll probably find yourself making some behavioral changes all on your own. And that would be my number one tip, is tracking your expenses, whether it's on pen and paper or whether using an app or a spreadsheet. Just get to tracking your expenses. That's step one.
Yeah, super smart. I totally agree. When you suggested that to us, we did it. I'm not saying that we're great at it. We're a little more on the spend side than the save side. But two questions from the comments, and then we'll go to the family caregiver authors. One question said, once you turn 70, life insurance becomes unaffordable. Is there anything else we can do? Any thoughts?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, generally speaking, I'd say that's true. I mean, frankly, once you're over age 50, all types of insurance tend to just get more and more expensive. And I would agree with the person that asked that question. I mean, you get to age 70, it is prohibitively expensive, and that's even assuming you can even get coverage in the first place. Unfortunately, as far as life insurance and long-term care insurance are concerned, there's really nothing you can do to decrease those premiums. That just is how the insurance companies have to look at their own, risk management practices and who they're willing to insure and provide that insurance to. The alternative at that point would be just self-insurance, meaning saving more money, investing in growing your money, and being able to use that for those long-term care and possible survivors' needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And second question, thank you for that, Stephen. What if what if you are under Medicare or Medi-Cal? Can we still get long-term care insurance? Do you know about that?
It's possible that you could, but I'm going to generalize here for a second. If you're on Medi-Cal, most likely there's some financial rationale as to why you were able to qualify for that in the first place. And that sort of suggests that you might not have the funds available to pay the premiums for long-term care insurance. Unfortunately, long-term care insurance is not an inexpensive type of insurance. And again, you can sort of design those policies and make the benefits more or less rich to try to decrease that premium. But there's a good chance that it may already be outside of your budget. But to my knowledge, there's nothing in terms of qualifications, right? Being in Medicare or Medicaid or Medi-Cal that would preclude you from getting long-term care insurance. What could preclude you is the insurance company not approving your coverage because there's other health history that they're just not going to allow to extend that coverage to you for.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Makiba K, Jean, any reactions, any comments, any questions from you?
Well, I just want to talk to that last issue. Medi-Cal just came out with sort of a revised list of assets you can have still be eligible for Medi-Cal. It's pretty new, so it's not as there's certain sources of income eligible for Medi-Cal. So it's worth pursuing to anyone who's in that situation.
And what we will do is because we have other partners, and I know for a fact they have a couple of documents that kind of speak to this. We will add that to what we send out in the replay. How's that?
Yeah,
Cool.
good idea.
And Makiba and Jean, or do we want to go into legal?
I'll speak to just the whole financial balance of it all. It is a balance, but like I said, I've become a fierce advocate of having to say the harder things out loud. Death is a part of life, and life insurance is not the same as burial insurance. And realistically, looking at someone who's later in age, you have to really balance, and I've had to learn this firsthand, you have to really balance the rationale of spending money on a life insurance policy or a long-term care policy. If you're being adequately cared for, then really you should be considering one, how to assist the person that is taking care of you with the expense of your care, as well as covering the burial expense, because life insurance is not burial insurance. I've become such a fierce advocate of helping people understand the difference between those two, specifically people that are over the age of 50, and understanding the financial implication and how you're investing your money. And if you're going to invest a large sum of money on a whole life policy, at the end of the day, you're still going to have to be buried. Look into the reality of what it's going to take to lay you to rest the way that you want to lay the rest to rest, because we are all going to leave here. I've come to that very real conclusion. We don't know when, but we know that it's definitive. It is definitely part of life. But planning and having a realistic approach to how you're going to account for those two very important life transitions. One is to your long-term care, and two is when you're expired and you're dead, and you don't have a need for all those things. How have you invested your money to cover those two very critical expenses?
Mm. From experience, Makiba. Thank you, an expert. Jean, do you want to say anything, or shall we shall we tackle
Yes,
legal?
yes, I had a interesting situation with my mom. She said I want to prepay my burial, and I kept reminding her that we needed to go and take care of that. And finally, I recognized it needed to be done. So hopefully, this will help other people that, would like to set that up. I went over and got it in place, and my mom paid for all of it. But it is, as Bakiba said, significantly, as we all know, more expensive if you wait until the person passes away. So, one of the first things one of my three older brothers raised when my mom was getting really close to passing was, what about the burial? I said, Robert, that's all prepaid. Mom prepaid that. So, my meeting with the mortuary was just planning the details of her memorial. Um, so I would really impress upon people, if they can, if they're in a position to put that in place. I will add, it was a bit of a budget buster for a couple of years, because you're paying for the burial portion and then the service portion, and uh, it will take up some of the budget, but it is well worth doing.
Hmm.
And if
Yeah,
I
So I
could,
would just encourage people to go down that road and explore it, because it is, as we all know, a great deal more. And you're already dealing with so much emotion and so many other things at the time planning the memorial, that I can't imagine having to also deal with a huge uh, financial item alongside of losing your loved one. So
hmm,
prepaid burial is a great thing if you can do it.
yeah, great
that's
advice, and I can see our experts nodding. Um,
okay. Read the
and
fine print.
read the fine print. um, okay, so let's do this. We don't have any other questions in the comments, but those who are listening and watching, I want you to type the word legalese into the chat if you've already found yourself running into challenges with legal documents you needed that you didn't really know about, or if you're trying to prepare but you're not even sure what in the world you need. So type legalese into the chat. You will see you are not alone. And with that, we are going to go to our legal experts. So we've got TC and we've got Yolande. We're going to take TC first. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, and then we'll go into the presentation.
Yeah, well, great. Hey, thanks for letting me be here. I just wanted to thank the LACRC for the opportunity and to speak with folks. So my name's Tom Christopher. Everybody calls me TC because I have two first names. I grew up here in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. My folks bought a place up in the hills of Burbank, had four kids. I'm the youngest of four. Have a twin sister who's 3 minutes older than me. Okay. I became involved in estate planning because my first semester of law school, my dad, who was a smoker all his adult life, went to a checkup and got diagnosed with cancer from smoking. I had to jump into crisis mode for my parents at that time. And that's what taught me estate planning was so important. That's why I do it. I've done it for 30 years. I have my own office. All I do is estate planning. I help my clients who I've prepared trusts with in trust administration. So it's really about taking a very practical approach and getting together a set of documents that states what you want and how you want to have it happen and whom you want to deal with things. And that's super important here. So again, I'm an estate planning attorney, have my own office. I've been doing this for 30 years. So what is estate planning? Why do it? Well, because if you don't plan, you really are going to hear this a lot. The government's going to have a plan for you and you're not going to like it. estate planning is putting together the necessary documents to make sure that what you have gets to who you want it to go to without any kind of cost or time or formality. Now that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, poof, somebody's going to wave a magic wand, and here in California, you're not going to have a bunch of formality and deal with things. But the most important thing isn't getting things to people after you've passed. It's what we're dealing with here today. If you're alive and can't manage your own affairs, the documents have a detailed plan in there, and it really helps you make sure that everything should get done by the people you want in the manner you want it. So let's go to the next slide. So it's preparing of tasks that manages one's financial situation in the event of their incapacitation or death, not just their death. People just kind of think of wills and trusts for after you've passed away. If you're alive and can't manage your affairs, it's critical to have these documents put together. And it ensures that your wishes are taken care of. So that's what's really important. It protects you, it protects your spouse, it protects your family. It'll minimize the costs and time for dealing with administration during your lifetime and after your death. So we really want to deal with things, and we want to make sure that we also protect benefits received by people with disabilities. We do that quite often if you're receiving some kind of disability benefits through special needs trusts, things like that. And it can minimize potential tax consequences. I do want to start out by saying this. To have a taxable estate now in the United States, you would have to have assets as an individual that exceed about $13.6 million. Married couples can pass over $27 million through their estate. So we're not dealing with estate taxes typically. We're looking at avoiding probate and probate court and trying to, as best we can, avoid conservatorships, things of that nature, if not necessary. Next slide, please. So key terms to know, and I put will up on top because most people have heard about what a will is. So you have wills, you have a trust, there's living trusts. A will is basically a document that if you just have it, you have to end up in the probate court. Probate is to be avoided at all costs. It is a lengthy, formal, time-consuming, expensive process. Even if you just have a house and a bank account, it can take 2 to 3 years to get through just a basic probate without any kinds of soap opera facts or any kind of disputes and things. Now, when you have a trust, what you're dealing with is an agreement that says, while you're alive, you're going to manage your assets. It's basically a legal entity. And you have this plan that says, look, if I'm alive, I'll manage my assets for my benefit. If I can't manage it, here's who's going to manage it for me. And the critical thing that I'm going to kind of link to in all of these things is that you have very consistent management, whether it's your trust, your power of attorney documents, whether they be advanced healthcare directive or your power of attorney. If you put different people having financial decision powers in different documents, you're going to end up with financial disputes. Those kind of things are very important. Special needs trusts, they're basically put together to protect a person's benefits. In its most basic sense, if you're receiving benefits, the assets that are put into the trust are meant to supplement your benefits. And if they're used in that way and they protect the person with disabilities from getting that money themselves, having it considered income, then their benefits won't be reduced or in certain cases negated because they've inherited assets from a parent or from anyone else. Probate is the process where people have to end up in the court. The court looks at the documents. The court appoints who's going to manage things and who's going to get it. And if you think of Disneyland on the most busiest day and standing in line for the most favorite ride or the most popular ride, it's that on steroids times about 1,000. It is a overrun court system. It's impacted and they're understaffed. Power of attorney documents, Again, we have financial power of attorney documents they're generally called durable power of attorney documents. They're for financial matters. They state if you're alive and either unable to make your decisions or you need someone to step in for a specific purpose, who will make those decisions and what decisions or powers you're giving them. Let's go to the next slide. So again, just in looking at this, a will help caregivers who are left behind because care recipient has a clear instruction to set up what's going on. The threshold for probate, and it's really important that you understand this, is very low in California. It's $184,500. So if you own a home, you're going to be in the probate courts if you own a home. If you only have a will, you're going to end up in the probate courts. But you know what? If you don't have assets that exceed that, it does provide people with direction. Let's go to the next slide. Again, trusts, it's a general term. Probably 98% of the trusts people talk about are called revocable trusts. And that means that people can make changes to them during their lifetimes. Okay. Once people become incapacitated, or if they pass, then they become irrevocable. There are certain kinds of trusts that are protected or that are prepared during a person's lifetime called irrevocable trusts. That means once you've prepared it, it's not able to be changed or updated. Now, they're generally for specific tax purposes or asset protection. You need to be very careful when you're using irrevocable trusts and putting real property into those kind of trusts. So absent any other detailed explanation, if irrevocable trusts own real property, it very much limits the benefit you can get on when somebody passes on that property to you, real property, houses, land, during when you pass. But trusts need to be properly drafted and funded. So that's the other thing. People have this box that's called a trust, but they haven't put anything into it because their attorney didn't tell them to, or they didn't take an active role in telling them, hey, now you need to fund your trust and what that means. So it's very important. Living trusts, they're made while somebody's alive. They transfer ownership of their assets into the trust. It's called funding the trust. Okay. You can create a trust and you can be called the trustee, which is the manager of the trust. You're generally called the settlor or the grantor of the trust, is the creator of the trust, and you're the beneficiary. Okay. And then you name people whom you want to receive your assets once you pass and how you want them to receive that. Okay. Again, revocable trusts allow people to make changes. Irrevocable trusts, you lose the control to be able to do that. Next slide, please. All right, special needs trusts. There are various kinds of special needs trusts. There are self-funded special needs trusts where if somebody was in an accident and received a settlement, or they received other monies, and now they're incapacitated and they're going to be receiving benefits, they can fund that themselves. The overwhelming majority of special needs trusts I deal with are for parents with kids or family members who have disabilities, and they're already receiving disability benefits. If they don't receive assets through that trust in a special needs trust, it will be considered their income, and it will reduce or could negate their benefits. So it's just very important. There are certain attorneys that just specialize in special needs trusts, and that's very important. And they're very important parts of a team. The folks that we have here today, Stephen being a financial planner, is immensely important as part of an estate planning plan in what I do. Your accountant or having an accountant involved in most cases are very important. Other types of attorneys that specialize in disabilities and things are very much important too. Next slide. So probate should be in red, and there should be underlines and exclamation points and maybe frowny face emojis next to it or something. Probate is where, if you die with only a will, or if you die without a will or no documents, it's called intestate. Probate is the courts dealing with things, and you deal with things in a very formal way. You have you have to hire an attorney to be able to do that, because if you don't and you mess up on procedure and you get to your first hearing, you may get continued 6, 8, 12 months for your next hearing, even when you just need to clarify a certain issue or prepare a certain document. It's very expensive, it's very formal, it's very time consuming, and it makes things public record. So, if anything, probate is to be avoided. So, next slide. Power of attorney, again, financial power of attorney. They are durable power of attorney, and Yolande is going to talk about advanced healthcare directives and things later. Financial power of attorney documents need to be detailed. Everybody's seen perhaps that 2-page check the box, fill in the blank document, or the 3-page, document with the same thing. Well, nobody ever checks all the boxes, and they certainly don't fill in the blanks properly. So it's really important that people understand these power of attorney documents. They're used while you're alive and either unable to make financial decisions, or you're alive and you need someone to step in. The question, one of the initial questions we ask whenever we do that is trying to make sure that our trustees, the managers of the trust and the successor trustees, are basically the same people in the same order in the durable power of attorney, the financial power of attorney. Because certain financial institutions, if you're alive and can't manage your affairs, want to deal with the successor trustee. Others want to deal with the agent under the durable power of attorney. So it's really important that you understand the more consistent financial decision making you can build into the process, that it's very important. The other thing is this. People need to consider whether they want their power of attorney documents to be effective immediately upon signing or only upon their incapacity. If it's effective immediately upon signing, people can step in and assist others even when they're not incapacitated. A great example was this. I had a client who, at the beginning of this year in late March, went to Spain on a great trip. Well, the day before she left, she broke her foot and had to have surgery. So she was stuck in Spain. She couldn't fly for a bit, but she also didn't file her extension on her tax returns before she left. So because her daughter was her agent and her document was effective immediately upon signing, she could step in and do that. So that's just an example of a practical situation. Now, the other thing people need to worry about when they make these things effective immediately upon signing is the person you're dealing with going to try and take advantage of you at some point? That's the give and the take, the push and the pull with regard to these types of documents and when they become effective. But the most important thing is that you use detailed documents, because the financial institutions or the government institutions you're going to be dealing with, they're not just going to take a common sense approach. They have risk management procedures that their legal department dictates to them. So if you don't have things detailed as far as the powers of your agent to act on your behalf, if you have a long-term disability, if somebody needs to step into your shoes and deal with things in a long-term way, even in a short-term way, it's very difficult to get these institutions to do that. So next page. So actively planning. What does that mean? It's not prepare it once and put it on the shelf and let it sit around. It makes sure that the people creating the trust, their wishes are adhered to. It'll bring clarity to what people need at that point. It's a snapshot. It saves tremendous amount of time and money when correctly prepared and funded properly. And it'll maintain privacy with respect to dealing with things. Probate matters are public record, and they become your petition, different things like that become public record. So when you have a trust, everything is done privately by the people you nominate with regard to how you want them to manage things. Next slide, please. So if I could kind of distill this down into one thing today, it's really important that you plan, and it's really important that your wishes are known. And people don't just know them even when they know you very well and they've lived with you for quite some time, or they're your kids or your relatives or your closest friends. They don't know that. You've got to put documents together that make sure everything happens the way you want it. Having a trust will avoid probate. That will avoid formality. But it's also very important that once you have a trust, that it gets reviewed every now and then. It depends on how many significant changes are happening in your lives and the lives of your loved ones. Did your, when we prepared our first trust, we had a 2-year-old child. That 2-year-old child's now 27. So things have changed tremendously, and our trust in him to be able to manage things have changed. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity. If there are other questions, my information is here. And again, thank you.
Thank you, TC. We have questions in the comments. I know that the family caregiver authors have questions. What we're going to do is go directly to Yolande, and then we'll bring everybody on. You ready, Yolande?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for attending because it's so important to just get as much information as you can get. It's a fog. It's basically a new career that you're undertaking, becoming a conservator. And just as I had to sit for the bar exam to become a lawyer, and basically, even though I passed the bar exam and started working as a lawyer, I knew nothing about practicing law. So unfortunately, for a lot of people, it used to be that by the time the person you're caring for no longer needs care or has passed, you finally figured it out. So we're trying to help you find knowledge and get some information before you run into trouble. I'm a conservatorship attorney with Betzetic Legal Services. Betzetic provides free legal services to residents of Los Angeles City and County. I've been working in the area of conservatorships for 25 years, and a lot has changed. There is a big move away from conserving people, and so pre-planning and planning in advance is becoming more and more important. The courts really want to know what you have done in order to avoid a conservatorship, and really looking at conservatorships as the last thing down the line. I have spoken numerous times and have represented Betzetic on 5 of the 7 continents speaking about conservatorships. And I will tell you that the good news is that California has always been really innovative and ahead of the curve and ahead of the rest of the world on a lot of issues. So that's always good, but I still am learning things all the time from every meeting and conversation I have with people, and knowledge is power. So I'm going to talk to you today about what you can do to avoid a conservatorship, and then we'll talk about conservatorships. And there are a lot of tools, and the first one I'm going to talk about is a power of attorney for healthcare. Now, the power of attorney for healthcare is very different than a power of attorney for finances, and it's also called an advance directive. There's a lot of terms. You can find them anywhere on the internet. You can download them. You don't need a notary unless somebody is in a long-term care facility. It just most of them require 2 witnesses. One of the witnesses signs twice. It's a simple form to fill out. And that's where the standard of capacity comes in. We are all presumed to have capacity, and the standard is for a financial power of attorney very different than the standard for a power of attorney for health, for medical powers. It's a lesser standard. which doesn't mean by the word using the word lesser that it's any less effective. I think what is important about a power of attorney for healthcare, if you have somebody in early stages of dementia, for example, that still can say, I want my daughter to take me to the doctor. I want my caregiver to help me with my medication. I'm forgetful about whether I took them. I want my daughter to call and speak to the doctors. I want to, her to talk to my chiropractor. So it's a lesser standard. It's enough to know that you just want somebody to help you, and that person is called an agent. And the nice thing about a power of attorney is if you change your mind and decide you change your agents, or something has happened to your agents, you can revoke it by simply creating a new one. So it's a lot easier document to fill out. And if you're the person, the care recipient, still has that ability to choose to sign for you. And there's also various ways to sign if somebody can't sign. It's a form that's very easy to complete, and it's very effective. I'm sure most of you, when you go to the doctor, the first thing they ask you, when is your phone number still the same? Do you still have the same insurance? Do you have a power of attorney? And if so, do we have a copy on file? Copies are as good as the original. And a power of attorney for healthcare allows you to not only obtain medical services for the conservatorship, but it also allows you to decline medical services for the conservatee rather. But in addition to, if the conservatee, or the person, the care recipient rather, excuse me, is able to sign a power of attorney, the other benefits of it are they can nominate you to be their conservator if there is a need for a conservatorship, and they can make their wishes known about end of life decisions, or they can note that they have a burial plan. And if you're, in addition to the care recipient, what's really critical is that you have your own power of attorney for healthcare, because we have found over the years, we call ourselves the caregiver unit at Betsedic, because most of the services we provide are to the caregivers. And we found early on that yes, they may have a power of attorney or a financial power of attorney for the care recipient, but they don't have anything for themselves. So going for something happens to them tomorrow, the care recipient's in a better position than they are. So I would urge you all to get a power of attorney. You can download the forms just about anywhere. Oftentimes your health professionals will have powers of attorney they can give you. And as I said, you can revoke at any time. You can name alternate agents. It's just a handy document. And for those of you that are referring to the power of attorney that may have been created by the family member or the care recipient, I think what I've found to be really helpful with my clients is that they may have very different views on end of life decisions, but it's somehow very comforting to know that their family member chose how they wanted to make end of life choices. And so it's not something that you have to do. You honor what they asked for in the power of attorney. And I found among family members, as we all know, nobody can agree on anything about. So it's another great tool that you can express your wishes for your health care, and you can rely on what the conservatee or the care recipient made in terms of the power of attorney. They are called a lot of things, advanced directives, and they used to be called living wills. I don't think those terms are as popular in California, but there are a lot of terms. And California will recognize powers of attorney made outside of the state of California. And generally, powers of attorney are interchangeable. It's very different. As I said, it's a much less formal document, but it's probably the most important in the sense of providing medical care. And again, the other critical thing about being a care provider is if you want to decline medical care for your care recipient, you can do that under a power of attorney. It's obtain care, decline care. Okay, so that's a little bit about powers of attorney for over the person for medical care. And now I want to talk to you about some way. How do I get control of finances short of a conservatorship? There's something called a representative payee, and if your care recipient, we got to get a better word for this. It's shorter word. Receives government benefits, then you can get a doctor to say that they lack capacity to manage their money. You go to the Social Security office and you sign up to become the representative payee. So my representative payee would read Yolandi Erickson as representative payee for Paulina. And I would open a bank account the same way. I am the recipient of the I'm the representative payee, and the beneficiary's name is there as well. My obligations there are to use the money in that account, to use the Social Security, the SSI, the government benefits for the benefit of the care recipient, and it requires sort of an kind of informal annual accounting of what you spent the money on. It's a very simple document to fill out, but that goes a long way towards giving you some financial control. However, and it's also available if your loved one or your care recipient receives VA benefits, or, and I don't see these as much anymore, but or a railroad pension. So anything that's coming from the from federal programs. They are oftentimes called, I think the VA calls them a VA fiduciary, and railroad pensions, there's another name, but look around and see what monies your loved one is getting, and how you can make decisions about that money short of getting having a financial power of attorney, or getting getting a conservatorship of the estate. The other thing is, if your care recipient receives Medi-Cal, there is an authorized representative form that you can have that person sign, or again, show that they lack capacity to sign that to, in order for you to access Medi-Cal and in-home supportive services for your care recipient. Also, VA has some programs called aid and attendance, and I'm not really going to talk about a lot of these things, but there are other ways to get care monies for caregiving to help support. And then there are other things like joint bank accounts. So a lot of these things make me a little nervous, because you sign on a joint bank account, then somebody can take all the money out of the bank account. There aren't the provisions to require you to account for any of the monies that are spent. So depending again on the relationship and your comfort level, but a lot of people do add somebody to their account. That's another way. If you find that you're unable to use any of those things, and the person hasn't been able to sign a power of attorney for healthcare, and you find that you need a conservatorship, what you want to do is ask yourself, why do I need a conservatorship? What is it that I'm trying to do that I can't do? Sometimes it results in, you find out that there's abuse going on, that a caregiver, a private caregiver, or a hired caregiver may be taking advantage of your loved one, and you think you need a conservatorship to stop the abuse that's going on. They may have gotten a power of attorney. They may have gotten a power of attorney for finances. They may be making the health care decisions. They may be taking advantage. There is, in California and in Los Angeles, we have a clinic at the courthouse to get an elder abuse restraining order, elder independent adult. So if you have someone with an intellectual disability or a neurocognitive disorder, or is that is not an elderly person, you can obtain a restraining order, and there are different levels. It's a lot easier to get. Um, and that may be something you need to do in an emergency way to stop abuse if it's going on. It's a tool that hopefully none of you will have to use, but there is no cost to file an elder abuse restraining order, and it's available at the, I know it's at the Stanley Moss Courthouse. They have clinics for restraining orders there. Um, if and in the restraining order, if you did file a restraining order, the judge can also order, if there are powers of attorney, they can put a hold on them, they can void them, but they're probably going to tell you that the best thing for you to do is to proceed with obtaining a conservatorship to really protect that person. And it's not just, again, it can be more than just financial abuse. It can be neglect, isolation. There are all sorts of reasons why somebody might need a conservatorship, is not, instead of just being able to take care of them. It may be to stop bad things that are going on to their loved one. So as Tom said, we have the probate court in Los Angeles hears conservatorships. We call them conservatorships in California. In the rest of the country, they mostly use the term adult guardianships. So a lot of people that move to California and think they need a guardianship, they'll call me and tell me they need a guardianship. And a guardianship in California is for a minor, somebody under 18 years of age. So it's a little confusing, but you know, what would the fun be if we couldn't make it confusing? And there are three types of probate conservatorships. There's a general conservatorship over the person and or the estate. There's a limited conservatorship, which is for people with intellectual disabilities. So if you have someone that's an adult with, you know, Down syndrome, intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, autism, you may need a conservatorship in order to manage their care once they turn 18, or and a limited conservatorship is called limited because the legislature sought to only take away the powers from the conservatee that they couldn't enact. And knowing that most limited conservatees receive probably SSI, so supplemental insurance, as their income, they added a power to the conservatorship, the limited conservatorship, which is to control the conservatee's right to contract, which alleviates the need for a conservatorship over the estate. So you can prevent somebody from engaging in a contract. You can invalidate a contract. Otherwise, you would need a conservatorship of the state in that case, and or if somebody has a great deal of money or property, you would need a conservatorship of the estate. The third conservatorship is a neurocognitive conservatorship. These used to be called a general conservatorship with Alzheimer and dementia powers, but we now realize that neurocognitive disorders can take all forms, not just including traumatic brain injuries and other neurocognitive disorders. The interesting thing about a neurocognitive conservatorship is it allows you two very specific powers. You can have the power to authorize psychotropic medications for the treatment of some of the neurocognitive disorders, and or you have the power to place somebody in a locked facility. And that's the only type of probate conservatorship that would allow you to place anybody in a locked facility. Otherwise, the conservatorships for mental health conservatorships, which might give you that, are not heard in the probate court, and they are not part of this discussion. So who can be a conservator? Anybody over the age of 18 can be a conservator. It can be a friend, a family member, and there are professional conservators. professional fiduciaries are oftentimes act as conservators. So all the requirement for conservator is that they're over the age of 18. You can have co-conservators. My husband and I want to conserve our adult son as a result of a traumatic brain injury, then we can act as co-conservators. The only thing, you can have more than two. At a certain point, it gets a little crazy because you're supposed to make decisions together. And oftentimes, I've had people that want to put their cousin in Toledo on this, and it's for practical purposes, it's not really going to make a lot of sense. The court wants you to prove that the person that you're filing for conservatorship over lacks capacity to make decisions. So how do you prove that they lack capacity? You have to get something called a capacity declaration from a doctor, a psychologist, or a religious healer. And in 25 years, I've never had a religious healer fill out a capacity declaration. I'm hoping before I end of practice, I'd love to see one, but I haven't had one. And the court is going to take what the doctor or healthcare expert says about the capacity of this person. And again, you can file for conservatorship over the person, which are most of the conservatorships that I handle are conservatorships over the person. So you're saying that that person lacks capacity to make decisions about their care, custody, and control, including their medical decisions. So where they're going to live, how they're going to get their food, how are they going to get their care, who is going to help them with their activities of daily living. And or you can file for conservatorship over their estate. Now, hopefully, if you've been able to get some of these other documents in place, you won't need a conservatorship of the estate, because conservatorships of the estate are costly, because every year you must do an accounting of the money, how the money was spent, what monies came into the estate, what money went out of the estate, and if there's any significant amount of property, you have to post a bond to protect that property from being wasted while you are the conservator. And those come with, you are a fiduciary, and you have a lot of fiduciary obligations to the court. The court in all kinds of conservatorships retains jurisdiction over the conservatorship. So until the conservatee passes away, until the conservatee dies, the court is going to be looking at the conservatorship every 1 to 2 years, sending out somebody from the probate investigator's office to take a look at, is this conservatorship still necessary and appropriate? And if you know somebody that is conserved and you have questions about how that person is being taken care of or what's being done, anybody can call the probate investigator's office at the Superior Court and file a complaint, and the court will do an investigation. And if they need to, they will set an order to show cause and have the conservator come in and explain what's going on or why there is some concern. So there are a lot of safeguards on a conservatorship, but again, with the conservatorship of the estate, oftentimes the conservatorship can be paid for, and the cost to do the accountings can be paid out of the estate of the conservatee. And oftentimes you'll find family fighting over money, and you're thinking, well, this is what is going to be left to take care of the conservatee if you're fighting over the assets of the estate and constantly challenging all of this. So but that should be your biggest problem if there is a large estate, because if there's a large estate, enough money to really take care of the conservatee, that's what everybody wants, that person to be taken care of in the best way possible. So it's a catch-22. What's available is is a small estate. And I also, if you're getting a conservatorship over the person, and we do at Bethesda, we have a in conjunction with the Superior Court, we have a conservatorship clinic where there's no charge for a conservatorship. You do represent yourself. There's help with completing the documents, but it's a great alternative, especially if somebody, most people are computer savvy. They can do the forms, they can fill out the questionnaires, and the clinic just helps make sure that everything is in place. The fee waivers, it does cost money to file for conservatorship, and it costs money for the probate investigator to go out and investigate. And if the person has Medi-Cal, in-home supportive services, other benefits, or you fill out a fee waiver, the charges can be waived based on the conservatee's income. So that's a help too, especially if you're running out of money to take care of this person, and you're thinking, now I've got to spend the money to pay for a conservatorship over the person to get medical powers or a small estate power. Again, that can be based on the conservatee's income and not, as most cases, based on the person filing the conservatorship. What else did I want to add? I think that the other thing to talk about is a small estate. Again, I come from a legal aid perspective, so conservatorships of the person and small estate are really what I deal with. And when somebody needs an expert for an estate, that's when they need somebody like Tom, or they need really complicated estate planning and money. You have, you have the experts here, and that's where you go. But again, not everybody has the finances to do that. Or that their conservatee has that sort of money left. So a probated conservatorship of the estate is available. It's to be technical, it's a probate code 2628. And what is a small estate? A small estate never counts government benefits. So if you get $2,500 a month from Social Security, and you have and your residence doesn't count, the value of your residence, if the conservatee is living in the residence, and then your other income aside from the government benefits. So I'm getting $2,000 a month, and I've got $24,000 a year. Then I can, in the conservatorship year, let's just say it's January to December, if I earn no more than $15,000 in addition to the $24,000, I can qualify for a small estate. And what's really important about that is generally you will not have to post a bond. So the conservator will not have to post a bond to protect the money in the estate. And you won't have to do these annual accountings, which really can be very expensive and quite time consuming, and require you as a conservator to keep an extraordinary great records to be able to provide the attorney. So that's my little tidbits. And if you have any questions, again, we always try to go with alternatives to conservatorship before we look at conservatorships. But there are private attorneys like Tom that are happy to help you and have a great deal of expertise. Just my biggest tool is be careful that when you just look for somebody that's a probate attorney, that they have experience in conservatorships as well, because within every part of the law, it's just like medicine. There are experts in every field, and it just saves you time and money if you have somebody that is that's really knowledgeable. And finally, I just almost forgot to tell you this, but when you file for conservatorship in the state of California, and again, this is different everywhere, and in parts of the state, they do it differently. So they appoint an attorney for the conservatee, which really oftentimes, why does that person have an attorney? And again, it's just another level of protection. I mean, in the old days, look, we wholesalely conserved everybody if they were a problem and had a lot of money. We put people in institutions that were difficult to deal with. And so there's a lot of built-in protections. And one of those built-in protections is a group of attorneys called CAC's Court Appointed Counsel. And every conservatee in Los Angeles County, and I believe in the state of California, sometimes they use the public defenders to act as the CAC, are appointed a lawyer, their own lawyer, to look over the paperwork and advise their client of what somebody is trying to do to them. So there's another level. There are many levels of protection built into the conservatorship process. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
And do we have questions? So before I go to the family caregiver authors, we've just got some questions in the comments. One is there a minimum dollar amount where a trust or will is needed? Like if there's no home ownership and no big money accounts?
So
Plug in
with
my
regard
computers. I'll
to
let Tom handle that.
Sure, with regard to a trust, if you don't have assets that exceed the threshold for probate, which again basically it's a random number, $184,500. Okay, um, then you may not need to have a trust. But if you own real property here in California, chances are you're going to have a trust to make sure that land is transferred without having to go through the probate process. Absent vacant, undeveloped land out in like California City that people bought back in the 70s because they thought they were going to build up California City, that kind of thing, that's worth it, if it's worth like $5,000 or less, that kind of thing. You can go through a short form probate, but you're still going through probate. So, as a rule of thumb, if you own a home, if you own real property, you should have a trust.
Awesome, thank you. And next question says, do your debts go to the next of kin to pay?
Your estate,
Yeah.
your estate is liable for your obligations. Okay. Now, your trustee doesn't become responsible for your debts personally or anything of that nature. If you don't have money to pay back your debts in your estate, then there's no money there. So, go ahead, Yolanda. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was just going to say, and there's also the issue of debt of a community as well. If your spouse dies, then the community would be responsible for the debt, even outside of that person's individual estate, if it's a community debt. I think I'm correct on that, am I, Tom?
Yes.
And we thank you. And here's one about my mom wishes to change her revocable trust to give me, her caregiver, a larger portion of the home than the other children. The other children are opposed. Mom is considering a parent to child property transfer. Could you speak to this?
So, first off, when you give a gift to a caregiver, it's automatically suspect in the eyes of the law. Okay. There are certain things that people can do, hiring other attorneys to look at things and try to see if it's a certificate of independent review, that kind of a thing. The reality is, if somebody were taken to court and they said, well, I'm the person who cared for mom, or I'm the person who cared for dad, and they didn't do anything, it's like, well, you're their child, and that's what they expect, that should be done, and you didn't do it because you were going to get paid. You do need to be careful. That is something that can start World War III with regard to litigation and things. Any gifts to caregivers and things like that. Now, if you give real property to somebody during their life, just like mom transfers it to child, during their lifetime, that child's, or if they put them on on title with them, as a joint tenant or something like that, they're going to lose their ability to receive a stepped up basis on the death of the parent. So, like with my parents, they bought a place in Burbank in the early 60s for shiny beads and whiskey, right? My mom, knock on wood, she's still alive. She just had her 90th birthday. She's actually on a cruise right now. She's in great shape, luckily, right? But if she put somebody on title with her right now, they would pay the full amount of capital gains from the date of purchase to the date of passing, or when we sold it, when the house is sold. If you receive it through the trust on the person's passing, you get a stepped up basis, meaning you step into their shoes as of the date of death. And then if it's sold after that date, then it'll only be from the date of death value to when the property's sold.
Wow. Well, okay, that I did not know. A lot of this I did not know. Another question: are annuities over $184,000 subject to probate, even if there is a named beneficiary that is a person and not a trust?
No, if you name a beneficiary, it avoids probate. Stephen, I didn't mean to cut you off. It looked like you were going to say something. Okay. So if you
Stephen,
name
can
a
you talk?
beneficiary, it'll go to them.
Yeah, if you can you talk a little bit about life insurance proceeds and beneficiaries and stocks and bonds having a beneficiary on the account?
Sure. Yeah, I'll
Because a
make
lot of
this quick.
people put their husband on, and then their husband is deceased and hasn't
Mhm.
updated that beneficiary list.
Yeah, a great just financial housekeeping item for everyone to do, frankly, on an annual basis is reviewing your beneficiary designations. I'd say it's across all of your accounts. Some accounts, these days, many types of accounts, many types of assets allow you to designate the beneficiary directly. There's even ways to do that with a home these days. That's the new thing, I think, as of just a few years ago, at least in California. But bank accounts, retirement accounts, there are ways that you can designate a beneficiary directly on those accounts. So that can be a smart, in lieu of doing your estate plan, which you definitely should do, especially if you heard from our panelists and from our caregivers here today. You definitely want to do that the right way. But beneficiary designations are really important as it relates specifically to life insurance. The vast majority of the time, you want to name individuals as the beneficiaries of a life insurance policy. The main reason there is for tax purposes. If I, name, it could be anyone, whether they're related to me or not, kind of doesn't matter. But if I name someone directly as the beneficiary of my life insurance policy, when I pass away, those proceeds will go to that person or people completely tax free. It's not necessarily always that way if you leave the proceeds to a separate entity like a business or possibly a trust. There could be some tax complications with that. So generally, with life insurance, you want to name the individual or individuals directly as a beneficiary. There are certainly smart and proper ways to use a trust or to name a trust as a beneficiary, but that might be a little bit beyond the scope of this program today.
Stephen, can you answer a question regarding trusts and minors? Because minors or cannot minors be named as a beneficiary? And in that case, is it better to name them through, have it go to the trust? I have a minor, and things get a little complicated when you leave a minor as a beneficiary. I'm not sure if you can do that or it was. Can you sort that out for me? Naming a minor as a trust versus or minor as a beneficiary versus putting in the trust because they are a minor.
Yeah, and TC was shaking his head, and he can speak to this
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, that's a great idea. And the main reason there, as you kind of learn about from our program today, having a trust gives you like maximum flexibility, right? You can name who's responsible for it. You can name certain stipulations. I mean, you can do also maybe be careful with that, right? But you can do all sorts of things with a trust that you can't otherwise just do on a very basic beneficiary designation, right? I leave this asset to my minor child. Now, a lot of times there are things built in where a custodian will be required for that minor child to actually inherit the assets anyways. That sort of depends on if the financial institution is doing their job right, though. So to not depend on that, and more importantly, to have your wishes carried out very specifically the way you want, very good idea to use that trust document. Very good idea to identify who in the trust. And correct me if I'm wrong, TC, right? But you could have the trustee that governs everything else for the trust, and you can name someone that's a completely separate party to be responsible, or at least to oversee even the trustee, but be responsible for that specific minor, right? That can be a separate party. Is that correct, TC?
Yeah, no, that is correct. And with regard to, minor children, they're what are called legally incapacitated. They can't contract with things and they can't do stuff. And if they receive monies, the insurance company won't pay out to them unless there's some kind of a court order. And quite often, when a court has a plan, it basically puts everything into a blocked account until they reach the age of 18 and then they receive everything. Whereas when you have a trust, you might say, I want everything managed for their, health, education, well-being, and maintenance, or, which covers housing and clothing and healthcare and, the education and everything that you spend money on kids until they reach the age of 25, because you don't want to derail them or see how many friends they can make when they inherit all this money when they're young. The only other thing I will speak to, and I'm not going to get into detail about it, is that there are provisions in the trust that allow those assets to flow through to the individual beneficiary. They're called conduit provisions. And whenever we have minors, we have to have those. And that's basically, that's as technical as I'm going to get. But yeah, with kids, it's much more easy to set up a very tailored plan as to whom you want to manage things and how you want it managed until they reach a certain age.
Yes, there's caregiver often, like you said earlier on the one of the panelists, I can't remember, the caregivers rarely have everything taken care of for the people that they're taking care of, but rarely for themselves. And this journey has
Yeah.
really taught me when I to put my house in order, and I still have several, God willing, many good years on this planet, but I did use the hardship that I went through with my mother to catapult my provisions for my minor child. Everything is in order, but I still want to talk to Stephen and Thomas just to make sure
Yeah.
that I've dotted my
Okay.
I's and crossed my T's.
Pretty sure you're not alone in that either, Makiba. And I hate to say this, guys, but we only have like 5 minutes left. And I am wondering if we just go round robin with your last words or your final takeaway you want people to know. Can we do that? I think it would be a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll go first. I appreciate these experts. What great advice. And the one takeaway I would want to leave everyone with, in 2014-15, I went to my mom. Dementia was setting in. Bottom line, I said, Mom, you need to amend your documents. Your money is less. You're not going to make your bequeath. So I could already see the writing on the wall. So get your documents in place, as the experts have urged everyone today. And furthermore, if you need to do amendments, because it just will make things easier when the time comes. As I've said, I'm in this situation where my mom's generous heart created a reality where the money isn't really there. The bequests were never really there, but I'm looking into a loan. So God willing, I stay in the home, but definitely take care of the documentation and update it as they have urged today. Update that. My mom didn't start her documents, or I should say finish. She was 82, but guess what? 14 more years passed. And you can imagine caregivers, all the expenses just kept going as they do for all of us, even if we're not caring for, an aging loved one. Everything is expensive. So 14 years passed and there was no updating. So update your legal documents.
That's a great one. Okay,
Life is just much
Makiba.
easier. I'll speak. Pauline and I speak all the time. Life is just much better taking care of someone with the documents in place, and I think Stephen, Thomas, and Yolande have kind of laid out the foundation of what's necessary. But just I've ran the gamut with my mother over the last 10 years of understanding and having the documents in place to empower you as a caregiver to take care of that person. They are absolutely necessary. They are necessary when you walk into a hospital. They are necessary when you walk into a bank. They are even necessary when you're dealing with siblings and relatives that have um, ulterior motives or just sibling rivalry. Rears its ugly head and complicates the situation. It complicated it for me through probate. It was a 3-year process. I survived it. I still have my mother with me, and the documents are now in place to make her final transition easier, not just for me, but for her transition as well. So it was a hard process, but grateful that I went through it, but can't help but speak to how much easier it would have been earlier in advance to have all of those documentation or not to learn the hard way of what needed to be in place, and certainly empowered me to make it easier for my minor child to not have to go through this process. So you live, you learn, you do better. Get the documents in place.
Get the documents in place. Kay, what's your last words?
Well, I didn't do any of this because I didn't know what to do. And so I kept avoiding it. And I have a million things to help me avoid it. And now I know I'm going to get that trust. Now I know what to do. So thank you.
Yay! And Steve and TC, Yolande, your number one takeaway or last words?
Well,
Sure, I'll
I
make
have a
this
couple
one.
things.
Oh,
Oh, sorry,
go for it,
Steve.
Yolanda.
Yeah. Um, you know, for I don't know, it was about 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there's sort of were living trust mills all throughout Los Angeles, I'm sure throughout the country. And they tended to be sort of worth the $200 people paid for them. But what is interesting about them, and if somebody never put anything into the trust or something, oftentimes you'll find a big notebook in the house somewhere, which was one of those. And oftentimes at the first meeting or second meeting of the group coffee at however they did these things, the community center, people did powers of attorney, and sometimes financial powers of attorney can be found in those notebooks. So even though they may not have funded the trust or done anything else with it, I urge everybody to start by looking through everything, taking note. Was my dad a vet? And the other thing, my number one takeaway is still the day my kid left for college, I said, well, you can't leave without having a power of attorney for healthcare, because even though I was responsible for paying his tuition, they wouldn't even let me open his account to see if his bills had been paid. And so I knew that if he got injured or had any problem while he was in college. So it's not just for elderly and infirmed. Get a power of attorney for your kids as soon as they turn 18, or your siblings that may have nobody, may not have a partner, offer to be their agent for a power of attorney, because that is just the first of the easiest step during a crisis.
Oh, that's a great one. Thank you. TC or Stephen?
Yeah. So you got to have a plan. I mean, it's kind of what we started with. If you don't have a plan, you're going to get an education in dealing with this. And I'll tell you, some of my best clients are people, unfortunately, who have gone through this. I became involved in it because, on a random Wednesday, my dad went to a checkup and he got diagnosed with cancer. So it just taught me how important estate planning is. And that's why I do what I do. But it really comes down to having a plan, making sure that the people that you hire to do this are going to be a resource to you on the back end also, because things are going to change. People you name are going to move away, pass away, or you just won't like them anymore. So you got to follow up with that and update that. So.
Yep. And on that note, the best day to start planning is today. So even if you're behind the 8 ball, it sounds like a lot of information. You don't know who to turn to or what to do. Well, hopefully you got turned on to some good ideas and some good resources today, and don't let that hold you back, because the only way you're going to get to the top of that mountain is if you take the first few steps in that journey. So best time to start planning is right now.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Awesome. I have to say, so I was rep payee for my younger sister, had power of attorney for my mom, etc. And those documents saved my life when I was a family caregiver. On top of which, having now gone through the estate planning myself, not being a family caregiver, I was shocked at the number of things that I did not know, even about my own spouse and their wishes and our financial picture. So I can't say enough about how incredible this has been. All of you sharing your information, from your stories with the family caregiver authors to our experts. You have really, I know, made a difference in the people who have shown up to get this information, and I can't thank you enough. We will send out the replays. We'll send out additional information as well. Also, please know that, yeah, we've gotten some comments on this is kind of scary. This is a little bit too much. And yeah, it can be, but it's more scary if you don't take a look at it when you are able to, right? Knowledge is power. So, and you have really empowered all of us. Now, everyone on this call, if you don't know, LACRC has so much to help you with your caregiver journey. Visit our website at Los Angeles crc.usc.edu. You see the URL right there. You'll find lots of resources. You'll also find support groups. Also, if you have not registered for our other events in November, our next one is November 21, and it's all about balancing transitions. How do you know when it's time to say goodbye to the person you're caring for, right? What are the other options? Where can you go for placement? How do you pay for it? All of that's going to be covered November 21. It's free. Please be sure to register. You've got the URL on the screen. Remember, also share your social media posts. Send it to our email, and you will be entered into a random drawing for the Caregiver Chronicles book. And finally, know this: you matter, not because you're a caregiver. You matter because you are. We here at the Los Angeles Caregiver Resource Center, we want to remind you of that, and we want to give you what you need to help make your caregiver journey a bit easier, and to make your journey, your own journey, a little bit easier. So we hope we've done that tonight. As a matter of fact, I know we've done that tonight. Again, a million thanks to our experts and our family caregiver authors, and to all of you who have shown up. Until we see you again, on behalf of USC and the Los Angeles Family Caregiver Resource Center, I'm Paulina Milana. I thank you for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Right.
Right.